Good morning students. Our chapter number 12 friction is going on. In the first period we learn about force of friction, factors affecting on the friction. In that we learn friction is depends upon the nature of the surface. Today we will see the remaining part of this chapter. Now see our next point. Friction is caused by the irregularities on the two surfaces in contact. Now, the friction is caused by the irregularities which is present on the two surfaces which are in a contact. Even those surfaces which appear very smooth have large number of minute irregularities on them. Now, see here which word is mentioned, minute irregularities. Now, some surfaces are appear very smooth, but it also have a large number of minute irregularities on them. Irregularities on the two surfaces lock into one another. When we attempt to move any surface, we have to apply force to overcome interlocking, and these irregularities of the two surfaces lock into one another, and when we attempt to move any surface, that time we have to apply the force to overcome the interlocking. On rough surfaces there are larger number of irregularities. Now on the smooth surfaces minute irregularities will be present, but on the rough surface a large number of irregularities will be present. So the force of friction is greater if rough surface is involved, and the force of friction is greater if the rough surface is involved. We see that the friction is caused by the interlocking of irregularities, in the two surfaces. Now this friction is caused by the interlocking irregularities from the two surfaces, and it is obvious that the force of friction will increase if the two surfaces are pressed harder. And now what happens when the two surfaces are pressed harder, are interlocked with each other very badly? That time the force of friction will be increases. You can experience it by dragging a mat when nobody is sitting on it and when a person is sitting on it. Now we can feel the experience of that when we drag the mat, when nobody is sitting on that time it will be easy to drag, but any person will be sitting on that, and when we are dragging the mat, that time it is very difficult to drag it. Recall your experience when last time you move a heavy box from one place to the another place. Now we have to recall a experience when the last time you moved a heavy box from one place to the another place. If you have no such experience, get the experience now. It is an easy activity you can do in your home also. What is easier? Now one question is asked here, what is easier, to move the box from the rest position or to move it when it is already in a motion? And we can definitely say that it is easy to move the box when it is already in the motion. याचा काय अर्थ आहे की एखादा हेवी बॉक्स तो स्थिर जागेवरून हलवण्यामध्ये जास्त फोर्स लागेल, तो जास्त इझी होईल की जो ऑलरेडी मोशन मध्ये आहे, ऑलरेडी मूव्ह करतोय, त्याला मूव्ह करण्यामध्ये तुम्हाला जास्त तो इझी होईल. तर जो ऑलरेडी मोशन मध्ये आहे त्याला आपण मूव्ह करण्यामध्ये आपल्याला जास्त त्रास होणार नाही, तो इझी होईल. द फोर्स रिक्वायर्ड टू ओव्हरकम अ फ्रिक्शन at instant an object starts moving from rest is a measure of static friction. The force required to overcome friction at an instant an object starts moving from the rest. When the object is start moving from the rest position, it is called as a static friction, and that measures is called as a static friction. On the other hand, the force required to keep the object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. Now here it is mentioned, the force which is overcome to the friction from the instant object starts moving. एखादी स्थिर वस्तू आहे, त्याला ज्यावेळेस आपण पुश करतोय, ज्यावेळेस आपण त्याला मोशन मध्ये आणायचा प्रयत्न करतोय, ज्यावेळेस आपण फोर्स अप्लाय करतोय, त्यावेळेसचं जे फ्रिक्शन आहे त्यावेळेस काय म्हणतात त्याला स्टॅटिक फ्रिक्शन. अँड ऑन द अदर हँड दुसऱ्या बाजूला ज्यावेळेस आपण लावतो, कधी की तो ऑब्जेक्ट ऑलरेडी मोशनमध्ये आहे, ऑलरेडी मोशनमध्ये, त्या सेम स्पीडमध्ये लावण्यासाठी ज्यावेळेस आपण फोर्स अप्लाय करतो त्यावेळेस जे फ्रिक्शन असेल त्यावेळेस त्याला काय म्हणतात, स्लायडिंग फ्रिक्शन. When the box starts sliding, when the box starts sliding, the contact points on its surfaces do not get enough time to lock into the contact points on the floor. Now, when we slide the box, that time what happen, when we start the sliding, that time what happen, the irregularities which is present on the box surface and the surface on the floor, they are not getting enough time to lock with each other, and that's why it is easy to move. So the sliding friction is slightly smaller than static friction, and you find it somewhat easier to move the box already in a motion than to get it started. Now here what is here, it is mentioned, when a box starts sliding, that time what happen, the contact points on its surfaces, the contact surfaces of the box and contact surface of the floor, they are not getting enough time into the contact points of the floor, and so they cannot lock with each other, and so that the sliding friction is slightly smaller than the static friction. Now our next point and most important point, friction a necessary evil. friction हा एक गरजेचा शत्रू असंही मराठीत नाव आहे. Recall now some of your experiences. Is it easier to hold a cooler? It is an earthen pot or a glass tumbler. Now here you have to give the answer on your experience. It is easier to hold the earthen pot or glass tumbler. It is easier to hold earthen pot. Suppose the outer surface of the glass tumbler is greasy or has a film of cooking oil on it. Would it become easier or more difficult to hold it? Now what happens, suppose that glass tumbler will be there, and the outer surface of that glass tumbler, it is greasy or it has a film of cooking oil. Would it become easier or more difficult to hold it? It becomes more difficult because of that cooking oil or the greasy surface. Just think, would it possible to hold the glass at all if there is no friction? We cannot hold the glass, suppose there will be no friction. We hold the glass because of the friction. Suppose with our bare hands, when we hold the glass, that time what happen, the irregularities which is present on our hand and the irregularities which is present on the glass tumbler, that interlock with each other, and that time we can hold the glass. Understand it? When the irregularities which is present on the glass tumbler, we already learned that the plane surfaces or the smooth surfaces which appears as a smooth, that also has a minute irregularities, and which is present on the glass surface, and the irregularities which is present on our hand surface, that interlock with each other, and that time we can hold the glass. And when the cooking oil or it has a greasy surface, that time these irregularities cannot interlock with our hands irregularities, and we cannot hold the glass properly. Now recall also how difficult is it to move on wet muddy track. You can face this problem in rainy season. Recall also how difficult it is to move on wet muddy track or wet marble floor. Can you imagine being able to walk at all if there were no friction? Now here the most important one, we cannot able to walk if there were no friction. We are able to walk when the friction will be there. That's why we cannot walk easily on the muddy track or the wet marble, because their friction is less, and that's why we cannot walk easily on the muddy track and wet marble. There where a proper friction will be there, that time we can that time we are able to walk. Now the next, you could not write with pen or pencil if there were no friction. It is also most important. When we are writing on the page, that time, or in a book, that time there is a friction between the pen and or pencil with the surface of the paper, and because of that, because of the friction, we can able to write on with pen or pencil on the page. When your teacher is writing with chalk on the blackboard, its rough surface rubs off some chalk particles which stick to the blackboard. And could it happen if there were no friction between the chalk and the board? Yes, it not be possible to write on the blackboard. Now here two examples are given which is related with our classroom. Now when you are writing with your pen or pencil on the in the notebook, that time what happen, there is the friction between the pen or pencil with the page, that particular paper. And when friction will be there, that time only you can able to write on a paper. When your teacher is writing with the chalk on the blackboard, its rough surface of the blackboard and that chalk, they are interlocked with each other, and the rough surface rubs of some small chalk particles which stick to the blackboard. And at the last, one question is asked here: could it happen if there were no friction between the chalk and the board? It not be possible to write on the blackboard. If an object start moving, it would never stop if there were no friction. Most important line from this chapter. If an object start moving, and it would never stop if there were no friction. एखादा ऑब्जेक्ट जर तो मूव्ह करत असेल तर तो कधीही थांबू शकत नाही. जर फ्रिक्शन नसेल तर कधीच थांबणार नाही, तो मूव्ह होतच राहणार. Had there been no friction between the tire of the automobiles and the road, they could not be rested or stopped or turned to change the direction of the motion. Now here one example was given. Suppose there is no friction between the tires of automobiles, between the tires of vehicles and the road. Then what will happen? They could not be started, they could not be stopped or turned to change its direction. You could not fix a nail in the wall or tie a knot, and we could not able to fix the nail also in the wall, and we are not able to tie a knot. Without friction, no building could be constructed, and without friction, no building could be constructed. Friction is the most important for that. Today, up to this we covered. Remaining part we will see in the next period.